This time I'd like to open the meeting. You did very well.
Oh yeah.
I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
McMahon. Anderson. Alice. Trombetta. Cup. Calandra. Sorry. Perkins. Visconti. Shields. Esposito. Sadi. Cabo. Tello. Diggs. Teichels. Arcanti. Curran. Knapp. Levy. Riley. Seabury. Stanley. Here.
We have 19 members present, 2 absent. The record please reflect that Mr. Knapp is out of town on business and Mr. Riley is out of town as well. At this time, council's indulgence, I would like to ask Mr. Gottschalk if he would please step forward to the microphone and give the council just a brief rundown on the happenings to date and how we got to where we are today, and some guidance on moving forward from here tonight. If you would be so kind, I would appreciate it if you would.
Pleasure. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be back. Rick Gottschalk, Danbury. 17 months ago, I think, more or less, you appointed a Charter Revision Commission, 9 members who held a public hearing, and perhaps held 24 meetings. At each meeting, members of the public came, some of you came to speak to these members. They tackled, as you heard tonight, they tackled some extraordinarily difficult issues. And I think that they did their best. I personally didn't agree with every choice they made, but I agree with most of them. And now it's your turn to take a crack at this. The commission sent you a draft report. It's their first attempt. It might be the final report, but it doesn't have to be. That depends on you. They submitted a draft report, and you had then 45 days to make recommendations back, to hold a public hearing. To hold a public hearing. You've held this one tonight. You have to have held your last public hearing within 45 days. And then you have an opportunity to make recommendations. You have 15 days to do that. The recommendations, the statutes don't spell out exactly the nature of the crafting of those recommendations. They could be, I suppose, general or specific, depending on how detailed you want to get. Could be, take another look at term lengths. Or it could be a specific recommendation to return to 2 years. Similarly with bonding, could be a general recommendation or a specific one. That's up to you. But then, I suppose there's a default position, which is you allow those 15 days to elapse without making any recommendations. If you do that, then the draft report of the commission becomes the final report. I'm assuming, based on what I heard tonight, that you will have something to say about these proposals. And there are many of them. Some of them didn't hit the radar tonight, which I suppose is the good news. But some of them are difficult to grapple with. You have 15 days then to make recommendations. Then the commission gets a chance to think about what they've heard from you. Before they issue their final report, the commission is to confer with the council concerning the recommendations. The statute doesn't say what in the world that is, but we'll figure it out. You have 15 days, you make recommendations, there's a conference of some kind, and then within 30 days of receiving your recommendations, the commission issues a final report to you. After the final report, you have 15 more days to accept or reject in whole or in part the contents of that final report. After that, you cause it to be published. You set a date for the voters, the electors of the city of Danbury, to weigh in one final time on these issues. You determine whether or not the questions, the contents, the text of these charter changes are to be voted on in one or in several questions. So you may choose to have one vote on the whole group of amendments, or you could choose to package them in any way you want. You could have the term length question stand alone, you could have the bonding question stand alone, or you could divide it up in some other way. That's how it goes. It's been, from my perspective, listening to the conversations that were held twice a month for almost a year and a half, an extraordinary experience.
Procedure, the 15 days, when does that begin running? And does the report back require this be from, does that require it be from the committee? Or does it have to go to the council and the council have to report it? I'm concerned because we're early in the month.
Yes.
More than 15 days before the council.
The 15 days starts to run after the last public hearing. I presume that's tonight. The statute describes the body as the appointing authority. The appointing authority in Danbury is the Common Council. So the Common Council has to make these recommendations within 15 days. And yes, we're in the middle of the month, and that's problematic, but that's what the statute requires.
Then again, as a point of order, procedurally then, this committee would make a recommendation to the council as a whole, and the council as a whole would then have to act. Or under statute, can this committee function as the council's opining on the report and going back? My concern is that we have a special meeting, we just would notice this is not on that special meeting agenda, and to wait until March, we're going to run into a position of having by default approval before us.
That's correct. You can wait until the regular March meeting if you do not choose to approve this or have this draft report be deemed the final report. So,
Excuse me, Mr. Gatchon.
is that not clear?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the way I understand the process, if they provide no direction tonight to the commission, the 15-day kicks in, and that would be deemed as a final report. If they provide direction, we consider this to be the conferring as well as the public hearing, or that's why this is held after the public hearing with the Charter Revision Commission who's here tonight. So if they provide direction to the Charter Revision Commission, they would then take that direction, go back and incorporate that, consider it, and then bring it back to the council in the form of the final report. That's the way I understood the process, Mr. Gatchon. Maybe I got it wrong. That's right. Right.
The statute, once again, the statute describes interaction between two entities. One is the Charter Revision Commission and the other is the appointing authority. In my experience, you've often had committees of the whole, and committees of the whole, action of the committee of the whole, never bound the council. But I defer to Corporation Counsel when it comes to what action constitutes the recommendation of the appointing authority. I had made an assumption, my own personal assumption, that what would happen is you would confer tonight, and then the council, acting at a special meeting, would come up with recommendations. But that's
I was under the impression tonight that that's what we would be doing, making recommendations as a committee of the whole back to the Charter Revision.
Let's take a 5-minute recess.
Point of order, is this a state statute you're referring to?
yes, it is. one other thing, the conference that I talked about, that occurs after you've made your recommendation, so that the Charter Revision Commission has some awareness of what the recommendations are when the conference occurs. So, one possible approach is that you have a special meeting, I understand for the 17th, perhaps that could be renoticed, and that night the council could come up with recommendations back to the commission, and then if the timing works out, since the commission has 30 days to act on those recommendations and give you a final report, that conference could occur on the night that you're next scheduled to meet in regular session. That way you don't have to come out another night. Then the commission would have perhaps 10 days after that. I don't have a calendar, I'm just kind of doing this off the top of my head. Then the commission would have another period of time, a week, 10 days, something like that, to come up with. Then the council would have, the commission would have another period of time, say a week or 10 days. Okay. A week or 10 days to issue their final report. Can the council vote to make their recommendations tonight? I defer to.
Corporation Council and Special Counsel for the Revision Commission, I'm going to ask Mr. Gottschalk to please, I'm going to ask Mr. Gottschalk to please explain what came out of our deliberations in our council chambers.
It's a suggestion to you, and it kind of abbreviates the process, or streamlines it rather, in an attempt to avoid multiple special meetings by the Common Council. Again, you have 15 days to make recommendations. The commission then is to confer with the Common Council and issue a final report within 30 days. And then the commission, and then the Common Council has 15 days to accept or reject in various forms. One way to approach this is for you to hash out the questions, the issues tonight, with the idea that your final decision with respect to recommendations will then take less time and will occur on the night of your presently scheduled special meeting on the 17th? On the 17th. The next step is this conference. The statute doesn't describe the nature of the conference, but it seems perfectly reasonable to have a group of council members, majority and minority leader, and frankly, Charter Revision Commission meeting and confer with the Charter Revision Commission with the idea that then the commission would be in a position to issue its final report prior to your March meeting. It's a condensed version of the longest possible sequence of events that the statutes allow us, but it works, or could work, certainly.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Court Counsel, you said hash out. Does that mean we construct the language on the proposed changes this evening?
That's your choice. You may simply identify the issues and put your recommendations in any form you like. You could say, revisit the bonding issue with the desire on the part of the Common Council to reduce those limits. That would be a recommendation. Or you could say, we recommend that you reduce the bonding limits to $1 million per project and $2 million in any given fiscal year. Or you know, substitute whatever numbers you like.
But it would be in the form of, we would recommend.
Yes. All the statutes requires that you either make recommendations or you don't. It doesn't describe the nature of the text, the format of these recommendations. That's up to you.
So the language needs to be very specific, you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you may choose to make it specific or you may choose to make it general.
Mr. Gattro, you could say you would like to refer it back to the Charter Review Commission for further review and leave it as vague as that, referring to like a bonding issue.
If you were to describe the issue and say for further review, that's a recommendation. It doesn't provide much guidance, but it's a recommendation.
Could I say, take a look at 6.3 and revisit the language, or can I be that general?
I think you can.
Mr. Seabury? Thanks, Mr. President. Just to clear my mind, are we formulating the questions that would go to the voters tonight?
No. After the final report is issued, then the final report of the Charter Revision Commission back to the Common Council, then you will vote to accept or reject anything in that draft report. You could jettison particular sections, accept the whole thing, throw out the whole thing, and then decide how it's to be presented to the voters and when. Well, I'm making an assumption that it will be next November, but it doesn't have to be. It can be any time within 15 months and in one or more questions.
Thanks. Mr. Lee?
Through the chair of the Corporation Council. Let me understand, the expedience here comes not by changing really the procedure, but somewhat of an agreement by the council, not if it came up on the meeting of the 17th, that we wouldn't get into any great debate at that time. We would take the recommendations that come out of this committee and just adopt those recommendations and send them back to the Charter Revision Commission. So you're really going back to the governing body. But it's a kind of an informal type of thing. The members here would make their recommendations tonight and we could speed it up.
That was the recommendation.
So we're not really changing a lot. Just
No, we've had committees of the whole before, and that's what they tend to do. They make recommendations back to the council, and the council usually approves them. Since they are you.
Mr. Shadi?
Procedurally, would, in order to express the recommendations of the council tonight, it could be general, it could be specific. Can it be in the form of a motion to recommend or at the will of the council and to put it to a vote? So I would move to recommend X, Y, and Z, and there's a second. That would be acceptable, wouldn't it?
That would be acceptable, certainly.
Mr. Trevetta?
A little bit confused. The recommendation of the council, but there's 19 of us here. How, there's 19 of us here tonight. Are we supposed to get together and banter back and forth and come up with one recommendation, for instance, term limits or whatever, and we agree as a body, and then recommend it as a body?
Yes, the statutes describe two entities. One's the Charter Revision Commission and the other is the council.
So then we, all 19 members, have to agree on a recommendation.
Not unanimous.
Not all, this is for a majority.
Already vote, like you do with everything.
Any other committee meeting you can have, same thing.
It's like an add-on.
As you say, we could be here.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of meetings here. We send this back to the Chair of Corporation Council. We send this back to the council on the 17th. At least that's the general one. Some meeting within the next 15 days has to
Yes.
go back to council approval. At that point, let's just assume for the sake of argument that there will be changes, there will be a recommendation of changes. So we'll
Yes.
be giving the document back to the Charter Revisions Commission, CRC, with the stipulation that they revisit some of these items, which they then
Yes. Yes.
or they don't. I mean, whatever they do, they do, not us. We've asked them to do something and they can then do it. Let's just assume again that they actually do something and come back with another document.
Yes, final report.
Is that a new document? Can
Yes.
it be recommitted? Does it start the
No.
process all over again?
No. The statute is clear that you must have a draft report. You've gotten that now. And that then the council has the opportunity, but not the obligation, to make recommendations. If you choose not to make recommendations, the draft report becomes the final report. If you choose to make recommendations, then the commission considers them, can accept them or reject them, but in either case has 30 days to issue a second document called the final report.
And then if I may continue, the only thing we can do at that point would be to amend that document or break it up for the voters or do things so that we can't even amend it.
You don't amend it, you accept it, or any of its parts. Thank you.
Okay, so we can't amend it, but we could delete sections.
It's up or down.
So it's an up or down vote on the changes.
Right.
We can't make amendments at that. We can amend it kind of tonight with these recommendations. And then
That's correct.
Once it comes back, it's an up or down vote on the separate issues, should we so choose.
Correct.
Thank you.
Fair on procedure?
We will have to, Mr. Chair, we'll have to renotice, which I'll instruct the clerk in the morning.
The meeting of the 17th.
And we'll add on this item, but this, as Mr. Lindy has mentioned, the vote on the 17th should do some of the these to identify the issues in that.
Okay, Mr. Gotcha, thank you. Don't go too far.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Now,